There are certainly many reasons for that. As I was going through internal medicine training here in the United States, I was exposed to many different areas within internal medicine. And there are certainly very many reasons why I chose oncology in the end, and it's in particular malignant hematology, blood cancers. And so the reasons are, first, this is one of the subspecialties which is still very rich in internal medicine. And as an oncologist, we touch with all areas of internal medicine. We talk a lot with different experts. We talk with cardiologists, with infectious disease specialists. So we are never too far from one or other area of internal medicine. The second reason is a lot of development which was going on at the time when I was going through my medical training, and I think even since then it has amplified. There are a lot of new treatments and medical treatments, immunological treatments in oncology these days. So from the scientific perspective, and from it is one of those, I believe it's one of the most exciting fields in medicine, period, not just internal medicine. And what it translates into is into this ability to help patients where we have been necessarily helpless before. That's the third reason, making a difference in lives of patients. Regardless of how things go, sometimes they don't go the way you would like, but I feel like in oncology we are making a lot of difference in patients' lives. For most patients, we are able to extend lives, or some cancers we can cure. But I feel like we help patients nevertheless, including in their final days. My focus is hematologic malignancies, so blood cancers, and specifically I have focused on B-cell lymphomas and chronic lymphocytic leukemia. I think the two main reasons why I chose this field is within the oncology is one, I am a physician scientist with an independently funded laboratory, and I like translational research. I like being able to take what we do in the lab directly into patient care, what we call bench to bedside, and I like working with primary samples, and this is an opportunity in patients with leukemia and lymphoma, where a lot of the new mechanisms and drugs and pathways that we can test immediately on primary cancer cells on the patient material. To some extent, we also are pathologists, so we look at blood smears, we look at bone marrow biopsies, we see the diagnosis with our own eyes, and that has always been very interesting to me, and a very different part of my job. I both do clinical trial research and laboratory research in this field. And there has been a lot of recent exciting developments in the field of lymphoid malignancies, a lot of new drugs, both in targeted therapies and immuno-oncology. And again, this is a great place to be. There certainly have been a lot of developments with targeted therapy in hematologic malignancies. There has been a lot of data at this past annual meeting of American Society of Hematology. There's actually a lot of data on chronic lymphocytic leukemia, some practice changing trials came out. There has been some new data with randomized trial with novel targeted therapies with the ibrutinib. There was a trial in younger patients which randomized trial where patients with previously untreated chronic lymphocytic leukemia were treated with ibrutinib or standard chemotherapy called fludarabine, Cytoxan, rituximab. And there was actually a survival advantage for patients treated with ibrutinib. Also, in older patients, there was a randomized trial of ibrutinib versus standard chemoimmunotherapy, bendamustine, rituximab. There was a progression-free survival advantage there for ibrutinib. One trial which did not make it to ASH is something called CLL14. and that's a trial which is looking at upfront use of BCL2 inhibitor called venetoclax, and there was just a short press release that it's a positive trial, meaning that this therapy is expected to soon enter frontline therapy of CLL, we would hope. So there was quite a lot of new data at ASH. We presented some data on comorbidities in patients with CLL and how it affects treatment with some of those novel targeted agents. We also had presented some data within the ubiquitin proteasome pathway using some of the novel compounds targeting the ubiquitin proteasome pathway in CLL and lymphoma. You know, I see it firsthand. The new pathways being analyzed in the lab, then new molecule is being developed in the lab, and then clinical trials happen, and initially small phase 1 clinical trials, which can be life-changing really for many patients, and life-saving rather for many patients, and then we see phase 2, phase 3 randomized trials enter the clinical trials arena, and finally drug approvals. And you know, it's a long process. It happens, it takes, you know, 5, 7, 10 years, more like 10 rather than 5. But ultimately it is all research driven, so we are able to offer those new therapies to patients because of the research which went on in academia and in industry. And the whole field of immuno-oncology really mushroomed over the past 10-15 years with a lot of new life-changing data for patients with melanoma and lung cancers and lymphomas as well. And all of this has come out of the research laboratories. So without this, those therapies would not be available. So there is certainly a clear link between research and what we see in practice in the end. Again, the new developments are really not possible without research in cancer. And cancer is unfortunately taking the lead as the leading cause of death in many countries. There is government support, but a lot of the research happens financed by the foundations. In the United States, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is one big foundation which supports a lot of research efforts, both basic and clinical. Lymphoma Research Foundation, so American Cancer Society. So those are really big foundations which make a huge difference in the end and support research which ultimately leads to drug approvals or approval of novel diagnostic methods or therapeutic techniques, and transforms patients' lives. So without research support, we can't have transformational changes in the field of oncology. We couldn't have had such changes that we see today. That's why it's important.